Over the 20-year history of the Battlefield franchise, there have been many great maps worthy of praise. Some maps become legendary, icons themselves of the Battlefield series and worth remembering for their balance, uniqueness, and special gameplay. This is the story of the best maps of Battlefield. In the case of Battlefield map design, bigger rarely ever equals better. Gigantic maps, not just of open terrain within the map boundaries, but more flags spaced farther apart, significantly disperse teams of 32 players to an extent that player engagements slow down tremendously. Map borders, terrain types, and elevation changes need to be carefully determined so as not to make travel distances extreme. Meanwhile, multiple hotspots need to exist to prevent all vehicles on the map from clustering in one small location. Constricting the lanes of the map to funnel combat into a vehicle grind is also one proven to be problematic, as seen on maps like Clean Sweep, Dragon Valley, and Dragon Pass. The challenge therefore becomes one of keeping vehicles from being clumped up, yet not spread so far apart, and providing infantry players a means of not being bored, either through a lack of engagements, failure to provide plentiful methods of easy transportation, or domination by enemy vehicles. On top of all of this, the map must do its best to remain balanced. One map from Battlefield 3 provides the answer to this conundrum in spectacular fashion: Bandar Desert. This gargantuan desert design hails from the game's third expansion, Armored Kill. It is so large, in fact, that by many determinations, it is the largest Conquest Battlefield map ever, only being dwarfed by Battlefield 5's Halvoy, the Firestorm Battle Royale map. The fact that Bandar's size works as well as it does is almost a miracle, and determining the reasons for this is crucial. Looking at the map layout first, we will see that it is almost a perfectly symmetrical design. This helps keep imbalances to a minimum by not offering one team an advantage via a better flag location. Next, each main base, while deep in a protected zone and slightly bottlenecked, has two roads which lead to various parts of the map and allow for multiple angles of breakout. The main base design here is extremely simple. After all, it does only place the map's vehicles on the main highway without any other assets. Usually this could be a bad thing, as it might allow enemies to camp the base exit and lock one team in their spawn. On Bandar, this rarely happens, and it's actually because of its size. It may take longer for one team to get around the map, but that also applies to the other team as well. Flags which get captured tend to stay that way for longer periods until enemy reinforcements arrive, and this gives more players a chance to spawn in at the mains and flow elsewhere around the map. This is also a design element supported by the same outcomes found on most large vanilla 2042 maps. As a result, the only action the main bases of Bandar usually see is players spawning in to take new vehicles. Fundamental to Bandar's success is that it clusters flags in two sections of the map. On the beachfront, a series of three objectives, A, B, and C, are tightly packed along the road. These points largely consist of the same map terrain and assets: small homes and two-story apartments separated by manicured lawns, pools, gardens, walls, and several palm trees and automobiles. Toward the B flag, a bridge sits above the main highway which connects each main base and sits along the beachfront. On the other side, a gas station and small garage sit adjacent to the on and off ramps. Behind the gas station, a natural wall of large boulders lines the road and begins a giant split in terrain types, as behind it, a vast sand dune stretches out in all directions. These three flags provide an area of infantry-dominated combat, although it isn't isolated completely. Tanks and IFVs still roam down the main road. But unlike the open desert expanse elsewhere, the huge amount of cover gives infantry players a massive advantage, as mines on the road prove troublesome and armor can be flanked and bombarded by rockets from all angles. Even in later stages of a round, when much of the surrounding cover is destroyed, there is still enough here to protect infantry and let them fight amongst themselves. On the beachfront, only the sea flag is unique in that it has a theme of heavy construction. 2 large cranes sit in an area comprised of building equipment and materials, providing a vast amount of cover and a verticality advantage. The cranes can be scaled for sniping positions, but I think someone's gonna notice you. The bigger danger is the deployment of PLDs and SOFLAMs from these heights, which can lock down vehicle targets a great distance away. This is where the large map design has its advantages. Unlike a map like Death Valley or Gulf of Oman, where high-rise structures give an insane advantage to lock on anti-vehicle weapons, the sheer scale of Bandar allows most players to simply be out of range and concentrate on the Mad Max-style vehicular engagements found further out. The second cluster of flags can be found far out across the desert toward the Crescent Mountain Range. These consist of the F and G flags. These are the artillery base and the army base, respectively. Right away, there is a drastically different theme from the relaxed and picturesque beach landscape. They sit across the main road from each other and are definitely a zone of heavy fighting throughout a round, with players going back and forth between them using the vast amount of cover nearby. The artillery base is a large and fortified design on the desert side of the main road. It has 4 main gates to provide vehicle access, but the perimeter fence can be infiltrated by infantry with ease. Filled with multiple fuel tanks, artillery guns, support structures, and sandbags, it is sometimes possible to be disoriented within. The capture point is fairly small, so taking it can be difficult, especially with enemies hiding nearby. A tank destroyer will spawn on the flag for the controlling team. A short skip across the main road will take you to the army base, or rather, what looks like it will become one as it's still under construction. 2 large multi-story buildings sit incomplete on the site, providing a vast amount of hiding space and cover. Concrete walls obstruct vision and provide pathing options for infantry, which is critical for when ground armor rolls up. Another large crane sits on the point, once again providing a height advantage for players who get on top. The army base is one of the most fought-over flags on Bandar because of the multiple assets it provides. A few quad bikes, 1 tank destroyer, 1 scout helicopter, and the controlling access to the AC-130 gunship which circles the entire map. Because of just how far out from any other flag they are, and with how much cover and space they provide, these areas are usually prone to containing squad spawn beacons, hidden behind walls and rocks which provide fast access back should both points fall to the enemy team. This also helps keep the battles here raging frequently. Both of these major sectors, the beachfront and the army bases, are the beehives of activity on the map. In a practical sense, the beach is usually just slightly busier than the other, but the advantage to this is that it helps split the map's vast assortment of vehicles. Some vehicles look to capture objectives, some want to head to the areas with the most infantry to kill, and others just want to engage enemy armor. And in this respect, both areas are usually very dangerous for armor to linger, as rockets and new tanks can be everywhere. In order to set a staging ground for armor, as well as a spaced reinforcement zone, a single flag between each main base and the army bases are placed along the outer road. These are the D and E flags, the mountain village and the mountain outpost. Both are extremely minor flags, with minimal assets and structures, though the outpost on the RU side definitely has more to it than the 3 houses of the village. On each flag, a tank destroyer and HIMARS rocket artillery piece spawn, making them valuable, if infrequently fought over flags. These largely serve as checkpoints, as players can use them to push in any direction, including out into the open desert. Oddly enough, these 2 flags are part of the reason full captures are rare here. With most players brawling for the major zones, these minor outliers are usually a free capture for the enemy team, at least temporarily, and this gives enough of a distraction for a losing team to move out and make some other gains. The terrain of Bandar is also a major source of its success. There are no giant verticality changes, at least none that are out of reach. The surrounding mountain chain is by far the highest point a vehicle or player could reach on the map, including those who try to SOFLAM from afar. However, the clear line of sight all around, and the angle of the slope makes pretty much anything vulnerable to well-placed tank shells or air power. The dunes in the center are almost an isolated battleground for armor when jets and helicopters are too busy to notice. Jeeps and tanks try to cross the desert quickly for a good angle or a sneaky play, and the chance is often worth it. The layout of Bandar Desert makes it, unsurprisingly, one of the best vehicle maps ever. It does an excellent job with spacing the vast array of vehicles out and gives infantry areas of effective counterplay. When you consider that the map had the biggest air fleet on a conquest map since Battlefield Vietnam's Operation Flaming Dart, this is pretty incredible. For just air vehicles, 10 aircraft could be flying at the same time. 2 fighter jets per team, 1 scout helicopter per team, 1 attack helicopter per team, 1 bonus scout helicopter from the G flag, and 1 AC-130 gunship. And the aircraft, because of the sheer amount of them, only cause minor issues for the rest of the players on the ground. This is 1, partially because they are always fighting each other, and 2, because the map size incentivizes them to split up and not overwhelm one area at a time. Additionally, each team gets 1 mobile AA, so wherever this vehicle is, the map provides space to avoid it if need be. A note must also be made of Bandar's AC-130 gunship, as unlike the few other maps in Battlefield 3 where it's present, its flight path here is so large that despite the beating it can give ground targets, within a few seconds it can be out of orbit for an extended period. Additionally, its rotation around the entire map brings it perilously close to each team's main base, allowing it to be blown apart by not only the team's mobile AA, but players in the base AA as well. This helps keep the AC-130 on Bandar weakened to the point where it's almost a non-issue. But Bandar Desert is known for its vast amount of ground armor as well. Each team begins the round with 5 tanks, 3 of which are tank destroyers. When you combine the amount of armor from each team and flag, we are talking 15 tanks. Consider this number, and also consider how well this map does with not funneling most of these into one area. Battles are ongoing experiences around the entire map, and this keeps players active in between the driving. Lastly, when you combine this amount of tanks with that many aircraft, you also have a map made for wild shots. Bandar is not a perfect map. While the environment is so extremely detailed and made beautiful by the sunset, it nonetheless suffers from Battlefield 3's sun glare problem, which certainly frustrates players fighting at certain angles. The beachfront also tends to be a shooting gallery for the attack helicopters if they have no active threat. But the most obvious problem is caused by its scale. While its design may make it a fantastic vehicle map, it only really flows well with a full 64-player server. Anything below 50 players, and the enemy encounters become fewer, map balance falters, and certain vehicles become overwhelming through a lack of players countering. As Battlefield 3 has been in its waning years for some time now, this problem has only become worse, and the map has become a rarity. Interestingly, its size is often the topic on the opposite spectrum. Bandar is often considered one of the few older Battlefield maps which could support higher than 64 player counts. When the Venice Unleashed mod first released, the player count was high enough that some servers experimented with server populations around 120. Indeed, Bandar was successful in this goal. In my experience with the modifications, the size kept the focus of the player engagements at the 2 major hubs, but significantly increased the intensity because of the higher density. In addition, the armor and aircraft faced similar challenges for the same reasons. But the map didn't need more vehicles. If anything, it needed more light transports. The only major negative was that it seemed to have an increased full cap possibility, something which was rare in the 64-player original. Regardless of modded player counts, it still performed admirably, something one can attribute to the balance of its structure and flag layout. Bandar Desert is simply a phenomenal vehicle map, and I want to stress again that this is incredibly rare. For the amount of armor and aircraft it has, it could have been a map which spiraled out of control every round very quickly. Instead, it spreads all players largely between two major zones of combat, where infantry have protection and a place to rumble. The aircraft can dogfight and choose a plentiful amount of targets. Meanwhile, the open desert allows for suicide bikes and tank battles under the setting sun. It is an exceptional map, and exceptionally large, which somehow defies all the odds.